They say love makes a family. I always believed that was true. That love was a kind of bond no blood could replicate. No law could force into existence. Olivia and I built that bond together. A mosaic of late nights and laughter, shared dreams, and family dinners around a scratched-up wooden table that, to me, was worth more than gold. For me, family meant Olivia, Ethan, and Ava. The house was never silent with them around. Ethan, with his baseball glove always on, forever throwing an imaginary pitch, always keeping an eye on the game. And Ava, with her endless chatter, her fascination with every animal, large or small. She collected books about them, stuffed animals of them. She was always finding a frog or a bird she was sure we should bring home. And Olivia, she was the one who held it all together. Or maybe, we both held each other and the family we had built. I liked thinking of us that way, a unit where each part strengthened the other. But it was a second marriage for both of us. And we carried our separate histories, even though we didn't talk much about them. Olivia's ex, Daniel, was a name that occasionally came up in stories about their past. The kind that always felt like something ancient and far away, like something that could never reach us here. She would tell me about how things used to be, and I'd feel grateful it was over and that she was here with me now. Still, I knew there were pieces of her I'd never have, but I accepted that. She was here, with me, wasn't she? I hadn't been a father when we met, but becoming one felt natural. From the moment I walked into Olivia's life, I knew I was walking into theirs too. I stepped into every role they needed, without hesitation. It was Ava and Ethan who taught me what it meant to be a dad in all the ways that counted. The late nights staying up with them, reading bedtime stories, sitting at Ava's tea parties, or cheering at Ethan's games that was fatherhood. I remember tying Ethan's cleats on his first day on the baseball team and how he looked up at me with a smile that could melt stone. Ava would sometimes slip her hand in mine at the park, her small fingers wrapping around mine with total trust, like she'd never known anything else. In some quiet way, I saw the love I had for them as proof of my bond with Olivia. I believed, maybe foolishly, that she saw things the same way. But lately, something had changed. Olivia was distant, distracted, as if she was somewhere else even when we were sitting side by side. I'd catch her staring off, or she'd let my questions drift away unanswered. At first, I told myself it was just the daily stress of life. I mean, with 2 young kids, work, and everything else that piled on, anyone could get a little lost now and then. But as days turned into weeks, I found myself unsettled by her absence. We shared a bed, shared meals, but it was as if she were already someplace else. Far from me, from our home. Still, I pushed the thoughts down, telling myself it was all in my head. After all, she was still there in the mornings. Still there for the kids. Still the Olivia I had loved for years. I knew that marriage was work, that things had their seasons. I tried to be patient, thinking it would all smooth over in time. But life doesn't always grant us the mercy of seeing what's coming next. I didn't know then that everything I believe about love, family, and the promises we make was about to be tested. And I had no idea just how much I'd soon be forced to question everything I thought I knew about being a husband and a father. The day I walked in and saw her, everything changed. It was an ordinary Tuesday, just another day in what I thought was our shared life. I'd left work early, wanting to surprise her with dinner. It had been so long since we'd had a quiet evening, and I thought maybe it would help bring us back together. I can still remember the feeling as I opened the front door. That strange silence in the house. I thought she might be out with the kids or busy with something in another room. But as I walked through the hallway, I heard voices, hers, and a man's. I froze. There, in our living room, was Olivia with her ex. They were close, too close, their hands entwined in a way that spoke of old habits, of memories I had no part of. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. It was worse than that, it was a kind of emptiness, like something inside me had vanished. I left as quietly as I'd arrived, too shocked to say anything. I didn't even look at her. I just turned around, walked back to my car, and drove. It was a long drive with no destination, a blur of highways and side streets. The numbness settled over me, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. How long had this been going on? Was everything we had built just a lie? That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to gather my thoughts. It felt like my entire world had shattered, and I had no idea what pieces, if any, I could salvage. When I finally returned home, the conversation I dreaded was inevitable. Olivia was waiting for me. A look of guilt and shame painted across her face. She tried to explain, to tell me that it was a mistake, that she'd been overwhelmed by unresolved feelings she thought she'd buried. But all I could feel was the betrayal, the hurt, a wound that cut deeper than any words could reach. In that conversation, I made a decision that felt like tearing a part of myself away. I told her I wanted a divorce. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal, no matter how much I had loved her, no matter how much I wanted this to last forever. But what broke me more was the thought of leaving Ethan and Ava. I'd been their father in every way that mattered. and the thought of losing them was a weight I could hardly bear. As the days passed and the logistics of separation loomed over us, I knew that, legally, I had no rights to them. I wasn't their biological father, and in the eyes of the law, I was just another adult in their lives. But to me, they were my children. The reality of that loss hit harder than I ever expected, a deeper pain than any breakup. I sought out a lawyer, hoping for some miracle that would let me stay in the children's lives. But every consultation led to the same heartbreaking conclusion: there was nothing I could do. Without a biological tie, I had no legal right to claim custody or visitation. All those years of baseball games, bedtime stories, and birthday parties, they meant nothing in the eyes of the law. In my desperation, I turned to Olivia, asking her to let me stay involved, to let me be there for the kids. But she was torn, caught between the lingering emotions she still felt for me and her loyalty to their biological father. Daniel, though she was sympathetic, I could see she was reluctant, unsure how this would play out in the long run. Moving out was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I left the home we'd built, the memories we'd made, and settled into a small apartment that felt foreign and empty. My days stretched out in silence, each one reminding me of the life I'd lost, of the family I still loved but no longer belonged to. I kept in touch with the kids when I could, calling them when Olivia allowed, but the calls were brief, awkward, filled with questions I couldn't answer. It hurt to hear Ava's small voice asking when I'd be back, or to listen to Ethan's stories about his games, knowing I wasn't there to cheer him on. After the divorce was finalized, I found myself struggling to hold on to any part of the life I'd known. Most people, when a marriage ends, walk away with a few scars, maybe a lesson or two, and some belongings to start fresh. But I was walking away with a kind of emptiness that no one around me seemed to understand. Losing Olivia hurt, but losing the kids, that was unbearable. Determined to find a way, I started keeping a journal. I wrote down every memory, every small moment that had shaped my time as Ethan and Ava's father. I wasn't just their stepfather, I was their guide, their protector, and their friend. I'd sat by Ethan's side when he was sick, stayed up all night with Ava when she had a nightmare, and taught them both how to ride their bikes. I had become a fixture in their lives, a constant they could rely on. And now I was supposed to just disappear. It didn't feel right. I documented everything I could: photos, stories, records of doctor's visits, school events, little league games, and every holiday we'd spent together. I built a collection of moments, each one proof that I was more than just a temporary guest in their lives. When I showed these to my lawyer, he shook his head. Without legal paternity, these won't mean much in court, he said, sympathy thick in his voice. But that didn't stop me from hoping that one day, they'd serve as reminders to Ethan and Ava of how much I loved them. Friends and family rallied around me, offering words of encouragement. "You've been the dad," one friend told me. "They might not understand now, but one day, they'll remember everything you did for them." I held on to that belief, even when it felt like I was grasping at something as thin as air. Some people suggested I go to therapy, but I didn't want to pour my heart out to a stranger. Instead, I found solace in a small support group for step-parents, people who knew the painful limbo I was living in. The group was a lifeline. Hearing the stories of others who had fought and lost, or who were still in the fight, made me feel less isolated. There was a strength in our shared struggles, in knowing I wasn't alone. Week after week, I listened, shared, and gradually learned to channel my grief into a new resolve. I knew then that even if I couldn't be their father in the traditional sense, I could be the best version of myself, so that one day, if they ever sought me out, I'd be ready to welcome them back with open arms. One quiet morning, a month or so after the divorce was finalized, my phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. She hadn't contacted me since the papers had been signed, so her name lighting up on my screen was both surprising and unsettling. My heart raced as I opened the message, fearing it was some final goodbye to shut me out of Ethan and Ava's lives for good. But instead, her words were softer than I expected. She explained that Ethan had been struggling in school, acting out in ways he never had before. His teachers had called her in for meetings, telling her that he seemed distracted, anxious, and Ava sweet. Sensitive Ava had been asking questions Olivia couldn't answer. "Where's he gone? Why doesn't he come over anymore? She missed me." And as I read that line, I felt a pang so sharp it was as if she were tugging at a wound that had never healed. Olivia said she hadn't realized how much of an impact the divorce would have on the kids, especially with me leaving so abruptly. She told me she'd spoken to her therapist, who had encouraged her to think about what was best for Ethan and Ava, even if it meant making sacrifices in her own life. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a glimmer of hope. She offered a compromise. I could see the kids on a limited basis, as long as it didn't interfere with her schedule or Daniel's time with them. It wasn't ideal, and it felt like more of a legal arrangement than a genuine invitation. But I was willing to accept anything. Just the thought of seeing Ethan and Ava again filled me with a sense of relief and gratitude. When I saw them for the first time after weeks of absence, I nearly broke down. Ethan, usually stoic and guarded, wrapped his arms around me in a hug that reminded me of his younger years. And Ava, her wide eyes brimming with unasked questions, clung to my side. It was bittersweet. I could feel the distance that had crept in during our separation, the uncertainty in their glances. But I also knew they hadn't forgotten me. We spent the afternoon together, and I tried to make it feel like old times, even if I knew that things would never quite be the same. The visits became a regular part of my life, a patchwork solution that was better than nothing. I saw the kids every other weekend, a few hours carved out here and there, and though it was a far cry from the life I'd once known with them, I took it with gratitude. Each visit was like a lifeline, a chance to build memories and be there for them in whatever way I could. Ethan's baseball games became sacred to me. I would stand at the sidelines, cheering as if I'd never been away, watching him grow stronger, faster, more confident with each swing. Even though I was no longer his official dad, I was his #1 fan. And that was enough for now. Ava would bring her art projects to our visits, showing me each drawing, every colorful, imaginative creation that sprang from her boundless curiosity. She still clung to her love of animals, and we'd often spend hours at the local zoo or park, her small hand in mine as we walked from one exhibit to the next. Those moments were a strange mix of joy and sorrow. I loved being with them, but there was always a bittersweet undercurrent, a reminder that our time was limited, that I wasn't truly part of their daily lives anymore. I had to make peace with being the fun parent, the one who wasn't there for school nights or sick days. It hurt, but it was better than the alternative. In those brief visits, I tried to pass on small lessons, instill values, and give them whatever wisdom I could. I wanted them to know that I was there for them, even if from a distance. Slowly, I started to see that I was still shaping their lives, even if in a smaller way than before. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest of pains. As the months passed, I learned to live with the new reality. I no longer held resentment toward Olivia, or even Daniel, because I knew that carrying that weight wouldn't serve Ethan and Ava, it wouldn't serve any of us. I forgave Olivia, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that was keeping me trapped in the past. In the quiet moments, I found myself thinking about the lessons I wanted to leave for Ethan and Ava. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, but it had taught me resilience, patience, and, most importantly, the importance of love in all its messy forms. I wanted them to grow up knowing that love could withstand any obstacle, even the brokenness of their parents' marriage. I realized, too, that my own future was still ahead of me. It was time to think about what lay beyond this heartbreak, about the person I wanted to become, not just for Ethan and Ava, but for myself. I started volunteering at a youth sports league, channeling my love for mentorship and community, hoping that I could bring the same joy I'd once found in fatherhood to other children who needed it. One day, maybe, Ethan and Ava will grow up and reach out to me, looking for answers or simply for a father figure they can still turn to. I'll be here, ready to welcome them with open arms, because some bonds are unbreakable, no matter the distance or circumstances. And until that day, I'll continue to live my life, carrying them with me in every decision I make, every step forward. It's not the life I imagined, but it's the life I have, and I've learned to find peace in that. Because love, in the end, isn't bound by titles or legalities. It lives on, quietly, resiliently, a bond that outlasts even the harshest of trials.